So our relationship with the people we're working so hard to serve in the healthcare industry is not great. In fact, if we were dating them, people would probably describe our relationship as being on the rocks. If we were married, we would most likely be in marriage counseling. There's an exercise that marriage counselors use to help relationships that are in distress. And in this exercise, what we would do is sit down and write down what we think matters to us and what we think matters to the other person. And then the other person would do the exact same exercise. And as you can imagine, there is not always a lot of overlap. So I thought, for fun, let's pretend we're married, and we're going through marriage counseling, and we're going to do this exercise. And I am the healthcare industry, and you are the people that we are trying to serve. So I sit down and I write that I think you're worried about your diabetes. And you sit down and you write how stressed out you are because you think you're about to get fired. And you hate your boss so much, you wish he would spontaneously combust into 1 million pieces. I write how much I think you care about being up to date on all your preventive screenings, especially the ones that mess with your private parts. And you write about your private parts too, but you write about a whole different kind of action and how you're mad because you're not getting enough of it. So then I write that I think you care about diet and exercise. And you write that at night, when your mother with Alzheimer's, who just moved in, asks you the exact same question for the 11th time, you care about how fast you can shovel comfort food into your mouth and drink yourself to sleep. I think our marriage counselor is going to tell me that I'm not doing a good job understanding you. And I think that's a perfect analogy for where we as an industry are screwing up. We are trying so hard, and we really do have all the best intentions. But in some ways, it's also this trying so hard, but trying on the stuff that sort of really doesn't matter to the people that we're trying to serve nearly as much as these other things, that might actually only be further pissing them off, because it's just a constant reminder that we don't get it. Health is life, and we have to expand the definition of health to include life, because when life goes wrong, health goes wrong. There is a phenomenon, a framework to describe this phenomenon that was invented in the 1940s. And I'm sure you're all familiar with it. And it talks about if your mother with Alzheimer's just moved in, and you hate your boss so much you can't breathe, and increasingly the only answer that you can find is at the bottom of a bottle, are you really thinking about your diabetes? Of course you're not. Maslow's hierarchy, I think, applied to the healthcare industry, we're trying to get people to hang out at the top of that triangle. We're asking people to eat a low-fat, high-fiber diet, get 7+ hours of sleep a night, blood pressure under control, up-to-date preventive screenings, regular checkups, exercise 30 minutes a day. Sleep, exercise, please. For way too many of us, our lives are a day-to-day challenge. Sex, drugs, and a crappy boss, money, caregiving, sleeplessness, troubled marriage, and for way too many individuals. And thank you, Peggy, for kicking us off with this. The basics aren't even shored up. Security, safety, clothing, housing, food. Mayo lists these 10 conditions, that's the top in the country. And I'm not saying in any way, shape, or form that they're not important. Of course they are. Incredibly important. I'm just making an argument that there may be another thing that's at least as important, if not more sometimes, which I'm going to call life sucks disease. Because I can say that. And all these components that make it up, all of them don't only keep us from operating at the top of that framework, from being our best self, they actually hurt our health as well. Now, this idea used to be a relatively novel one. It's kind of a new thing, but not anymore. Pick up any trade magazine, any journal, any newspaper, and the headlines are clear. Financial stress is killing us. Workplace stress is killing us. Relationship stress, killing us. Caregiver stress, killing us. And to cope, we're doing more of the bad things. We're overeating, we're overdrinking, and we're doing less of the good things that would help us build resiliency, right? We're not exercising, we're not sleeping, we're not hanging out with friends, we're not taking time to pursue our passion, our purpose, we're lonely, we feel isolated, we feel depressed. Now, when I say that these things are killing us, what do I mean? Well, financial stress in particular increases the risk for diabetes, heart attacks, migraines, ulcers. Workplace stress, hypertension, cardiovascular disease, decreased mental health. Relationship stress, hypertension, depression, anxiety, heart attacks. Caregiver stress, just take everything I said and add more, right? But I also mean is actually killing us. I don't know how many of you saw the article that was in the Wall Street Journal in November that said the death rate is rising for middle-aged whites, going past decades of gains in longevity. And there was a line in this article that haunts me. It said, in modern times, for a modern nation to have rising death rates is a sign of a nation in upheaval. Think about that for a second. It's a sign of a nation in upheaval. There was a follow-up study that was printed in the Washington Post. I think the Washington Post actually did it about a month later. And it said, yes, the death rate is rising for middle-aged whites, but it's actually rising the fastest for middle-aged white women. And it's actually rising the fastest for middle-aged white women. The biggest change is being driven from rural parts of America. One of the points that the article made was these early deaths are so conspicuous among white women because in the past, the members of this comparatively privileged group have been unlikely to die prematurely. The study said we're having trouble with the difficulties of life, and we are self-medicating to handle stress. What it basically said is we have life sucks disease. One study looked in particular at caregivers, and it found that caregivers were, in fact, over-indexing on the use of substances, alcohol, anything to handle this overwhelming life stress. I can share that I'm a caregiver, and I didn't need to look at any study to know that. I could look at my recycling bin. I think any of you who just looked up and recognized yourself when I said the word caregiver, what I'm about to share will really resonate with you, and any of you who didn't, I hope you pay attention as well, because one day we will all be caregivers. Rosalind Carter said there are only 4 kinds of people in the world: those who have been caregivers, those who are currently caregivers, those who will be caregivers, and those who will need caregivers. There are 44 million of us. I'm a Gen Xer. 42% of Gen Xers are in the sandwich generation. That means that we're caring for aging parents at the same time that we're caring for our kids. That's really, really hard. 50% of caregivers are doing medical and nursing tasks. 80% of that 50% is administering IV medications or injections. I heard a chief nursing officer describe this as the type of task that when she was a first-year nursing student would have made her shake. And we are sending people home to care for this person that they love so much with no training and asking them to do things that you would have to go to school to do. The value of this unpaid labor force is $470 billion. That's greater than how much money is spent on Medicaid, and that's greater than how much money is spent out of pocket on healthcare. Now, of all the stuff that I just shared, I don't think any of it compares. On one level, I personally don't even care compared to what I'm about to share, which is the impact of caregiving on our health. And if any of you in this room are currently a caregiver, please pay attention to this. If you are a caregiver, you are twice as likely to have depression. You are twice as likely to be coming down with a chronic condition. You're actually shortening your telomeres. And that is a how long you're going to live kind of problem. If you're over 66 and caring for an aging spouse, you have a 63% higher risk of mortality. So whether we're talking about caregiver stress, financial stress, relationship stress, or workplace stress, the reality is these life challenges are diseases in their own right. And they deserve a seat at the adult table, at the grown-up table, with the other diseases. Not just because the facts show that they are impacting our health, that they are a health issue, a health opportunity, but because they're the things that we're all thinking about. They are impacting quality of life. So UPenn did a study about quality. They looked specifically at Yelp reviews of doctors. And what they were interested in is when you take a human and put them in the privacy of their own home and ask them to write about what they feel as it relates to quality, what they would define they like about this doctor, what they care about, what they want to report to their fellow citizens, they look at the categories that those individuals, that real humans talked about, and then they compared that to what many consider the gold standard for quality in the healthcare system, which is HCAHPS. And it's a exercise not dissimilar to the one we just did in our marriage counseling together. And what they found that of the 11 categories that HCAHPS covers, humans in the privacy of their own home, left to their own devices, using their own words, only covered 7 of them. Or maybe you think it's great that they covered 7. The most important point is there were 12 additional categories that these real people talked about that HCAHPS doesn't even touch on. And these categories talked about things like compassion, and caring for family members. And it's not to say that the stuff that we've been traditionally focused on doesn't matter. Of course it does. All the stuff HCAHPS is doing, it does matter. It's to say that there are other things real people care about too. So this is an and. We need to expand the definition of health to include life. Because when life goes wrong, health goes wrong. And it's going so wrong that people are self-medicating themselves to death. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Macklemore. I have a 9-year-old and an 11-year-old, and we sing this a lot in my house. And he's an extraordinary musician, and he's tackled some topics that maybe other folks wouldn't have, talked about gay rights. He's talked about stuff that brings awareness to populations that might otherwise not have exposure to it. And his latest song is called Drug Dealer. And in this, he tackles really the enormity of the problem we have with the substance abuse epidemic, touching on the drug and alcohol-related deaths of Prince, of Amy Winehouse, Michael Jackson, the political pull of pharma, the opioid epidemic. And his message is really clear. And while the way he delivers his message is clearly different, the message itself is almost exactly the same as what we hear from the administration, as what we hear from the public health community, and it's what we hear from broken-hearted mamas and papas and sisters and brothers. Today, addiction no longer discriminates. Addiction has an equal opportunity policy. The refrain is haunting. It reminds us that this is our problem. My drug dealer was a doctor. He had the plug from Big Pharma. He said that he would heal me, but he only gave me problems. The song ends with a reference to the Serenity Prayer, a key part of the Alcoholics Anonymous meetings that has since migrated over and is being used by these addiction recovery groups. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. The wisdom to know the difference. This is stuff we can change. This is stuff we have to change. The numbers show that these life challenges are a massive and unrelenting health problem. But any problem is also an opportunity. Health is life. And we need to expand the definition of health to include life, because when life goes wrong, health goes wrong. We need to start asking people how they're doing, how their lives are. Financial stress, relationship stress, workplace stress, caregiver stress. These questions need to be standard operating procedure for any healthcare interaction. And it's not enough to just ask these questions. Then we have to respond. And we have to respond with empathy. Are you caring for an aging parent? Yes, I am. Oh, I'm so sorry. That's really hard. You are not alone. How are you doing? Are you okay? And actually, increasingly, the best first line of treatment, and we're seeing this over and over, is to connect people with someone like them. Connect them with someone who's going through a similar situation. In my caregiver situation, when I have particularly hard days, I come home and I will get so frustrated in interacting with this person that I love so much that sometimes I'll say really mean things in my head. And sometimes I will dig my fingernails into my thighs to keep myself from saying these things out loud. And sometimes I'll turn away and I'll go like this, by myself, in the kitchen. And then I wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and I full on hate myself. And I lie there and I think, you are the worst person alive. You love this human so much. What are you doing saying these mean things in your head? And I've learned over time that the only way that I can find peace is to find another caregiver and to say to them, oh, can I tell you what I did, what I thought, what I felt? Because they say back to me right away, oh, that's okay. I do the exact same thing. My best friends will dream up something that they did is even worse so I can feel comparatively better about myself. I love them. I love you. And the last thing is there actually really are ways to treat these conditions. And increasingly, the technology world is taking notice. Just look at the burgeoning activity in the caregiver space as an example. And I predict that more than any other area, this will be where we see growth in technology and healthcare, is addressing these life challenges. And I'm so thankful for that. So I want to close by coming back to our relationship, because I really want it to work. And I understand from marriage counselor that I need to therefore know who you are and better understand you. But I also understand that it's not enough for me to just understand what you care about. I have to care about that stuff too. And it's not enough to just care about it. I have to do something about it. So as an industry, let's agree to do that. Thank you.